Hey guys, it's Dani. Today we are working with some Dracula orchids, and those are some words that I never thought I would say, or not anytime soon, to be honest. Because these orchids, I'm gonna tell you from the beginning, they're not beginner-friendly orchids. They're not even suited for most home conditions, and you'll see why during this video. I have actually set up a special corner for them, which I never do for any of my orchids, but for these guys, I absolutely need to, and even so, I don't know if they're gonna make it through the summer. I'm hoping though, because the Dracula is the famous monkey face orchid, which you might have heard of, so you can see the appeal. So today I'm going to repot these two Dracula orchids that I just purchased. I did the unboxing a few days ago. And I'm also going to show you what setup I have for them. So I hope you'll enjoy today's video, and if you do end up enjoying it, don't forget to give it a like. It actually helps my videos out. And why not subscribe? I post 3 times a week. So most of the times when you will search for pictures with Draculas, you will notice that they are actually potted in net pots, not a typical plastic or clay pot. And this is because many Draculas have the tendency to produce their flower spikes from below them, pretty much like a Stanhopeia, or at least, if not really from the bottom of the pot, somewhere on the side. Now, as far as I see, the Dracula Felix doesn't actually produce such extreme flower spikes. They tend to be rather horizontal and they are pendant somewhat. So maybe that is why this particular Dracula is potted in a normal plastic pot. However, there are instances in which the flower spikes will simply grow and hit the rim of the pot. Hence, I'm not going to use a solid pot. For none of these orchids, I will use net pots. So first of all though, let's unpot this orchid. Who knows, maybe we have some flower spikes. No, we don't, we won't. It also appears that this orchid was recently potted. I don't seem to have a lot of roots, but I do have enough. I'm gonna try to remove as much as I can this bark, but I'm not gonna try to be super thorough about it because I might end up using a top layer of bark. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure, and you'll see why. Probably initially I won't. I'll explain it more when I will show you the setup. But I think my orchid is pretty clean. Another thing with Dracula orchids is that they have pretty sensitive roots, from my understanding. So I don't think this one has snails. I actually never had snails in any orchids that are coming from the Orchid Man. Excuse those noises, my birds are taking a bath as always. So I'm not gonna spray this one with hydrogen peroxide because I don't want to mess up the root system. And looking at this medium, I don't know if this is algae on the sphagnum moss or the moss is starting to come alive. I will actually put this separately in a different container. I'm not gonna throw it away. It might actually be alive. Case in which I will try to culture it because the setup for these orchids is actually pretty good for sphagnum moss as well. I might also try to start sphagnum moss from my sphagnum moss, which is totally possible, and I'll link you to a video down below about it. So I'll clean my tray and come back when I'm done. So the setup that I'm gonna go for is a net pot and sphagnum moss only. No mixture with bark, it's not necessary. I don't need aeration because the net pot is airy enough. So in this pot, even if a flower spike hits the rim of it, it can actually start to grow inside the pot and eventually it will find one of these vents. So it's perfect. So what I'm gonna do is just put sphagnum moss inside. With net pots, it's not so important to make it super fluffy, but I'm not going to compress it in any way. Just enough to have enough sphagnum moss that this orchid will not dry out way too fast. So I'm gonna continue adding sphagnum moss on top of the orchid, and as I was saying, I won't add the bark top layer, at least not now. We're gonna see how it goes, and most importantly, we're gonna see if this orchid will remain alive. And here we are, the Dracula Felix is done, and I have to say I really like these orchids which don't have a lot of roots, just enough to maintain them alive because they're super easy to repot. So I'm gonna put this one to the side and we're gonna take care of the Velutina now. Now the Velutina is a bit of a bigger girl, as you can see, and also it is potted in some sort of a net pot. It's not net, it's, well, ventilated, I guess. I'm not going to put it back in this pot. I have a better one. But let's see what we have inside. Maybe a flower spike, who knows? No, that would be too much. All right, so we do have roots and we have growing root tips. That is wonderful news. But there we go. I think we have a little bit of moss here as well. Is it moss or algae? I don't know. Nope, it's moss. I'm gonna leave it actually because you know what? These orchids will not sit in natural light and they will also not receive a lot of fertilizer at all. And even if they're gonna be wet all the time, I'm not entirely sure if it is the greatest setup for algae. So I might have the nice surprise of having, is this a root or a spike? It's a root, never mind. Okay, so I might have the nice surprise of actually the moss taking over rather than the algae. So I'm gonna give it a chance. If I see algae starting to form abundantly on the top of the medium, I'm gonna remove a layer of sphagnum moss, put small grade bark chips, and call it a day. So this orchid as well does have some roots, but not a whole lot of them, just how I like it. But it does have quite a few nice green root tips. So I'm gonna leave it like this. So with the Velutina, same story. I see pictures in which the flowers are on top of the medium pendant and some flower spikes decide to sprout from somewhere in the middle of the pot or under the pot. So for this reason, I'm choosing this net pot. We can see that it does have quite a big band here. But again, if a flower spike starts to be produced, it will go downwards. It will be pushed downwards and it will find its way out, unless it wants to sprout from the top. So I'm good. As long as half of it at least, plus the bottom is net, I am good. So I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'm gonna use sphagnum moss. So I'll come back when both of them are done and I'll show you the setup. All right, so I'm done with this Dracula as well. And actually, I think I saw a flower spike, which is very exciting. Let me just show you really fast. Do you see this little thingy right here next to the new growth? It looks like a flower spike. So I'm gonna leave this area like this. The sphagnum moss is not even, but I wanna see if it continues to grow. And I do think I saw another one, very, very tiny one. I don't know. I don't know what I'm seeing. I don't want to hope for anything. Let's just make sure that they are alive first. But oh boy, can you imagine if they do actually bloom. So now that we're done with the repotting, I will show you where I'm gonna keep them. And ta-da! This is the setup at a wide glance. I need to get you in closer though to explain a little bit things and to show you how it works. So first let's start with what the heck are those on the walls? Well, if you guessed shelves from the wire shelf, yeah, that's what they are. I love these wire shelves, but I always end up having extra, at least one shelf from each rack, let's call it like that, because the way I set it up, the distance that I leave in between the shelves is kind of big. So I'm always left with one or two just staying around the greenhouse, and you know what? They're put to good use now. Okay, so this was something that my boyfriend suggested. Initially, I wanted to do something else, and I will show you some footage from a very, very old video of mine, balcony days, when I used to have mounts. Oh yes, do you guys know I used to keep my orchids mounted some time ago? Well, I did, so I know firsthand how hard it is to maintain them hydrated. So what I did with that setup was just get some chicken wire or whatever type of wire fence and mount it on the wall with the use of some nails. So initially that's what I wanted to do, but of course not with chicken wire, with something prettier. You can find on Amazon, and I believe even IKEA, although I haven't been to IKEA in an eternity, I do believe they have those sort of desk grids where you can pin photos and other cute stuff that you want to keep around you. Initially I wanted to order something like that from Amazon, and I talked to my boyfriend and he said, well, why don't you just use your spare shelves, because they're wires, right? And I said, you are a genius, my friend. So that's what we did here. We installed 4 hooks into the wall, and I just hung these because they're kind of heavy. Nails were not enough. I did not trust them. So I actually drilled the wall and installed these hangers. Now, why would I use these grids? Well, to mount these stuff. Now, if you're a bird owner, maybe a rodent owner as well, you might know what these are. They're from the pet shop, and they keep the food and water dishes for your birds in the cage. And what are cages made of? wire. And how do they look like? Like a grid, exactly like this. So it was very obvious to me that I can do something like this and hang a pot, a net pot, an orchid, whatever I wanted on this grid. And hey presto, that is what I shall do. Now you might notice that I also have a sort of thermometer here. Let's just get it out for now. I wanted to check the temperature to see if my setup is functional, and it is. We're gonna do the test after we mount the orchids. So it just so happens that this particular ring just fits my Dracula Felix perfectly. But what about this guy? Because it's a little larger. Well, I have a larger ring for this one. And there we have it. Hey presto, isn't that lovely? And there are actually bigger rings for bigger bowls as well at the pet shop. If this inspires you, just take a trip to the pet shop. I swear there are so many useful things at the pet shop. Now here is a try with a clay pot. Now for this one, I am actually using the little dish as a tray because you might know here in my environment, I do rely on the dishes beneath my pots to deliver water. They act like some sort of reservoir. So if I would do this, watering would have to be done separately, not here, because water would just run from the pot, and also I would not have that reservoir. So for something that is meant to sit in a clay pot, such as a, oh, I don't know, Masdevallia, perhaps, you can actually use these little dishes as reservoirs. This particular one is not very straight, but there we have it. So this is absolutely possible as well. But of course we dealt with Draculas today, and they need to be free of dishes to put on their flower spikes because they can actually grow without you even noticing them, provided they're alive. Again, this is not a tutorial, and I really do hope that my Draculas will remain alive. Now this is the place where I actually keep all of my cooler growing orchids because I can keep it cooler than the rest of my greenhouse. First of all, we have the floor, and as you might know, cool air tends to sit on the floor while hot air rises. So that's one way of keeping things cooler. Second, you might notice that I am using clay pots with some of my orchids, and they're doing such an amazing job. Right now in the greenhouse, they're about 24, 25, let's say, degrees Celsius. And I took the temperature at the floor level, it was about 20 degrees Celsius, which is phenomenal. But still, for a Dracula orchid which cannot sit on the floor, it's not enough. It needs to be cooler than that, it needs to be more humid. So for them, we actually have a humidifier, which actually turned all of the setup off to film. And I also closed the windows, so the temperature rose a little bit, but typically I managed to maintain the temperature in this area at around 19 degrees Celsius. And outside right now there are 28, 30 degrees Celsius. It's wonderful. And if I can maintain 19, 20 degrees Celsius for the Draculas, they should be okay. It should be on the limit, but they should be okay. Bonus, all of that moisture. Alrighty, so I've been monitoring the situation because I actually recorded this a week ago, and I have to say things are going great. In the greenhouse, I might have 27, 28 degrees Celsius, and look at that, in the cool corner, I have 20 degrees Celsius. It's constantly 7 or 8 degrees Celsius less in this cool corner, which is a very big difference. I've seen it go down to 17 degrees Celsius, depending on the ambiental temperature, of course, and I've also purchased another thermometer that I keep on the floor, and even on the floor I do have quite a lot more degrees lower than in the greenhouse. So I do believe things are going good so far, and I'm optimistic. And P.S. one of the Draculas does have flower spikes. I don't know if it will continue to grow them due to the shock of switching environments. I do hope so, but shout out to Shayna, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, for guessing, because I just had to post a picture in the community section and have you guys guess. However, though, this is not necessarily enough because we are getting cooler temperatures with evaporation. That's what's keeping everything cool, or what's inducing the temperature to drop. Humidity itself, it will not make temperatures drop. Have you ever had very hot weather and humidity? It's not pleasant. So the humidity is not the key here. Air movement is. So for this reason, I also have a little fan, which I just turned on now, and you can hear it makes a little bit of a noise. And right now it is a little bit too close to the setup. And if I put it too close, you can see it's gonna produce a storm here. So I keep this guy at a distance. Right now I'm actually not using it. I'm just using the bigger fan, which just moves the air a little bit. And that is enough because it's not super hot at the moment, but in the heat of summer, I can totally use that fan. So do you guys remember that when I moved here, I got myself a tiny little greenhouse. I put the humidifier inside and I tried to grow Miltoniopsis in it. It didn't work. Why? Because the mini greenhouse was actually increasing the temperature. Obviously, the greenhouse effect. And even if the air was moving around the greenhouse, it wasn't evaporating because it was enclosed. So for this to work, I actually need open space and allow this water to evaporate, which is why I need air movement, I need the fans, and together with the humidifier, the clay pots, which do a really great job, and not only that, with sphagnum moss as well, because sphagnum moss stays cool as well, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that this will be enough. Now before I let you go, I will give you a little look-see here. So of course we have the Miltoniopsis, Nellie Eiler, all of those fun stuff, but down here I also have my Zygopetalums. You can see my Laudicea and my Macotis as well, which are not heat-loving plants. They are doing fantastic. The Macotis has just erupted with beautiful foliage. I also switched it to a terrestrial mix, and I think that made a big difference, but also I think the location is really suited for them. So this is my cool corner, let's call it like, it's not a corner, but I like to say corner, I don't know why. 2 new Draculas are added to this place, and yeah, I just hope I can keep them alive because I really want to have these orchids. I also want to have Masdevallias, which are just as finicky and as cool-loving as the Draculas. But first, yeah, I want to see how this goes. So with that said, I think it's time to let you go. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Subscribe to my channel for more orchid videos, tutorials, experiments, updates, and other fun orchid subjects. If you wish to support the channel, do consider becoming a member or visit the merch store linked down below in the description. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's always nice to stay in touch there as well. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!